All right, great. Well, welcome to the Save a Craft Load of Money series here for the Beverage Federation. We dive in everything from purchasing trends and economics shaping the craft brewing industry and want to get that out to a lot of our members or people who find interest or value in that context. So today we are joined by Matt Gacioch. So Matt is our subject matter expert, economics from the Brewers Association. So Matt, really appreciate you joining us. He's going to help us break down a few of the financial economic forces impacting breweries of all sizes right now, from resources at the BA, talking tariffs, and other industry trends. So Matt brings, really invaluable insight to help brewers navigate. I called it a busy landscape right now, Matt. I had the word challenging, but I feel like our industry has a lot of doom and gloom. So maybe we try to find a word with a little bit more positivity with its busy. So let's get started. Matt, why don't you tell us your story and tell us a little about yourself, and we'll get into things here. Your role at the BA.
Yeah, sounds good, Dan. And yeah, I like the framing of the busy landscape. I don't know that there's ever a time that the landscape isn't busy. For craft brewers who are cleaning tanks and serving customers and doing the bookkeeping and all that. I don't know if there is a non-busy landscape time, but I like the rebrand. Um, yeah, so Matt Gacioch, I'm the staff economist at the Brewers Association. So just diving into everything data and statistics related that relates to the craft beer industry. Um, that manifests in a lot of different ways, from working through national data sets, collecting some of our own data, trying to essentially turn a mountain of data into usable insights for our members. The Brewers Association, for those who are unfamiliar, is the industry trade group for small and independent breweries, and we represent the over 9,500 craft breweries throughout the country. And so, yeah, really excited to have a conversation today about some of the things that we're working on. I know some of the topics that are front of mind for a lot of your viewers. So, yeah, happy and excited to dive into it.
This is great, man. I appreciate it. I think that's a great place to start. Let's start with the data. We'll go for a softball question to start here, but it is one of the ones that I get, and you guys have, and you touched on the data that the BA has, great data set, and you're reviewing it, you're organizing it. Is there some things that you could touch on just for an awareness? I'm on the site on a more regular basis than I think than most, but what are some things and findings and insights that you find that people should be aware of that BA does? That you talked about taking data sets, turning into insight. What's the one
Yeah,
or two things that you would say to a brewer saying, did you know we'd have this, or did you know that we have that?
sure. Yeah, it's tough to whittle it down to two or three for
Sure.
a body of content that we've collected over the many decades that we've been in existence. But I'll try to keep it somewhat succinct. So, the first thing is one that I just have a lot of conversations with brewery owners and sales teams and folks in the brew house about is understanding consumers. So we do consumer survey each year in partnership with Harris Poll. And so there's I always put out some insights related to that about how consumers are evolving, what folks are interested in, kind of overlap between what craft beer drinkers are consuming in addition to craft beer, frequency, flavors they're looking at, kind of all of that. So put out some content related to that, but there's also for BA members the full data set. So anyone could go in and manipulate those numbers however kind of suits their need. Um, a kind of a second bucket that we have is benchmarking data. So financial benchmarking data, that is things related to revenue per barrel of beer produced, the cost of goods sold per barrel of beer, some of the margins and ratios that folks are looking at, just to kind of understand sort of where they stack up to others. We also have a salary benchmarking where folks can look and say, hey, for these job roles, what's the median salary? And obviously there's always going to be some variation related to geography and tenure of employee and things like that, but kind of give a sense of where those salaries and wages might line up. And then we also have some operational benchmarks in our sustainability benchmarking that is related to energy use per barrel of beer produced, water use, solid waste produced, those types of things, and CO2, which is front of mind for a lot of folks. It's kind of understanding where they fit within their peer group, so that it's good to be tracking a lot of these things in kind of a historical context, kind of looking and hopefully improving over time. But in a vacuum, it doesn't mean as much. So understanding sort of like what industry peers are doing is really helpful, I think, and from what I've heard from our members to help them really make strategic business decisions.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with that. You'll bring it together there, and I appreciate that. And also, I think the breakout you made sense there too, of big
Yeah.
amounts of data. One on the sales side, if you will, about
Yeah.
is there a trend emerging that I'm not getting insight into that might to make a decision on what we're making this fall or what we're maybe making less of to do
Yeah.
that, to start to plan and use some of that data and chop it up. And then to your point of having that in-house, I do know that's always challenging to find time. I say this, myself as a small business owner and talking to a lot of them. I think it's first knowing that it's there and then carving out the time to say, I'm going to take 30 minutes to look at something. It's interesting you said some of that I didn't know existed. For example, information on pay
Yeah.
to help with that, and also for some of the elements from a production side of understanding costing and benchmarking, and
Yep.
I assume that's also can be broken down at a regional level, so that you can understand maybe what would be a pay or a cost to put on something if you're in one part of the country versus another. Is that accurate that you
So
have that?
what? Yeah, whenever possible, we do break it out regionally, because obviously there's a fair amount of variation. But sometimes it's not possible. Like we don't get enough, survey
Okay.
responses from a particular geography to give kind of a significant result. And realistically, there's a lot of variation too. If even within a particular region, if you're in an urban center versus suburbia versus a rural setting, there could be more similarities across that type of area rather than say you're in the Northeast versus the West or something
Yeah,
like that. So,
sure.
so whenever possible, we do that. A lot of times we break it down by brewery size,
Okay.
so size categories, and as well as brewery type. So certainly revenue models are going to look, or revenue per barrel is going to look different at a brew pub versus a tap room versus a distribution focused brewery. So whenever possible, I'll be breaking those out by brewery type as well.
Okay, that could be helpful too. I mean, knowing
Yeah.
some of the profile, and to your point too, if you don't have the data, you can't present it that way. But I can even know sometimes when I'm starting to work on something and a budget review or something, it's good to have just a starting point, a point in the in a line in the sand, if you will, and
Yeah.
saying, great, I'm in Montana with my brewery, and this is a national average of something, but at least I have a starting point, and I can then understand that
Absolutely.
okay, my brewery is in a more rural area. This we're not a Chicago market or
Right.
Miami market, and but at least I know I'm this is an average to
Yeah.
start with, and then talk to others and using that data point accordingly too. So or we're this type
Yeah.
of organization, which can be equally helpful, is that I'm a thousand barrels annually, and so don't be comparing it to a 10,000 barrel annually. So that is
Absolutely.
helpful. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, to do that because I know I think the challenge anytime you have data, it's like, listen, I don't have the time to go
Yeah.
through this Excel sheet and get a national average on this roll or that, right? That's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
I need something to go talk to some people in about 10 minutes, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. But to your point, the folks that are taking 10 minutes to dive into data, 30 minutes if they have it, they're really at this point in this challenging or busy landscape that we're in, it really strategy has to come from data. There was a long stretch in the past decade plus where kind of call it the field of dreams era of craft beer, where if you build it, people came. They whatever you put out, people were drinking it. And at this point, kind of sticking with the baseball movie metaphor, it's kind of moving more into like a Moneyball era, where it's the folks that know how to use data to be strategic, to find the consumers they're trying to reach and optimize their operations. Those are the folks that are finding ways to not just maintain, but to actually grow in this time.
Yeah, I will. I think a great point. That is one that we could spend an entire topic on
Sure. Yeah.
is how to arm somebody with and find that right balance of, you do have to spend some time and how do you turn data into insight into strategy? And I think you're
Yeah.
exactly right. I am a data nerd, and I'm a big proponent of that, but also realizing that there's got to be a sweet spot
Yeah.
saying, and then getting that value and then have them say that was worth that 30 minutes. And then we did that. We used it, we applied it, and it helped. It helped us run better. So I'm an advocate of it where they
Yeah.
spend 45 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, don't get what they needed, and then they're walking around saying that wasn't helpful. So yeah,
Yeah.
I data,
Yeah.
but that is good to know about the
Yeah.
data being there and the
Yeah.
information and how can be used a variety of different ways. And that the BA provides that. That is great.
Awesome.
I wanna take the data conversation into the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Yeah.
Uh, Tariffs have consumed the industry. I'm sure you're busy with that. I am getting daily calls and emails on the topic.
Yeah.
And perhaps before we go tactical with this question, is there an update that you want to provide to the community? What I hear is a lot of frustration, questions, rumor, fact. I mean, it runs the gambit.
Yeah.
But is there something you're starting off the BA is communicating? I recently saw Bart Watson in DC. From an economic approach, is there an overall approach to this tariff environment that you guys are having before I jump into some of the tactical questions around what can
Yeah.
breweries do?
So this is a really tough one.
Okay.
You and I are having this conversation on Friday morning, and by the time it goes out into the world early next week, almost certainly whatever I say will be outdated. Things are happening
Yeah.
at such a fast
Yep.
clip right now, and in the past 48 hours, there have been tariffs imposed on Canada and Mexico, rollback in certain industries, and then rollback an extension for whole countries. And so there's just so much
Yeah.
that is unknown right now, that the first thing that we're doing is saying pay attention and don't panic. There's not there right now. We don't have enough information to have to set of like a strategic approach on things. We're still trying to see how all of this will play out, and so there's just a lot of question marks just in the ether to understand if these tariffs are kind of additive, if a tariff on a particular trade partner and then a particular product or commodity, if those are if if you're getting aluminum from Canada, is that the tariff on Canada, the tariff on aluminum, or both of those together, and how they interact? So yeah, there's just so much we don't know, but our government affairs team, I'm pretty sure they're not sleeping right now. They're just constantly in touch with their contacts and keeping up to date to try to provide the best information that we have available. But some of the things that we I guess do know is, and especially on the economic side, is kind of understanding the potential impacts of these, not to the dollar or cents, but kind of relative, just kind of like relative impact and understanding, for I'll use aluminum for example, that about 60% of the imported aluminum in the U.S. comes from Canada, and that makes up about 10% of total aluminum usage in the U.S. So, a 25% tariff on Canadian products, on aluminum in this case, we wouldn't expect to see prices of aluminum to increase by 25%, right? Because it's only 10% of the total amount that's used in the country. And so, that's the type of thing that I'm trying to get a handle on now to understand what it potentially would look like. But as I said, until we know specifically what that tariff amount is going to be, if it's added on top for trading partner and commodity or product, we're just not going to know exactly, to estimate what the impact would be.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And it's interesting. I started doing putting something together on this, and in January, and it's amazing how many times I've had to go back and update it, and
Yeah,
as you find out more, which is accurate. And I know we kind of, it's moving so fast, and then it's, you get one update and then you get an update that's contrary to it. It's not just that
yeah,
it's moving and then it's paused or the timetables are changing. It's
yeah,
like things swing wildly. And I you almost I laugh when you say that, but I also talk to it. There's a certain amount of the industry already had certain headwinds going into the year,
yeah,
and this has added a new busy challenge, I
sure.
think, to the industry, and so I feel when I'm talking to a lot of breweries, there's a frustration of I was already gearing up on how to grow sales and to focus on,
Yeah,
generational shifts or interest in, brew product lines and things like that. And now this is another line item that I have to educate, you said, and work on and
yeah,
do that. And so, and to not just ignore. So there's I think an overall sometimes, that frustration. And that's from the brewery side. We also talk with supply partners, and I know you guys
yeah,
interact with the supply
yeah,
partners, some that are US based, and I imagine some that are international based. And so
totally.
there's two groups. There's not just two groups. There's two distinct groups, but also within them subsets of different sizes organizations that, I think that can handle things differently. So yeah, it definitely is going to be a busy year, a challenging year with that line item. Let me ask you, is it so going back to your comment about that we don't know what we don't know right now
Yeah,
in a lot of
sure.
cases.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that one of the things I hear though from some of the brewers we talk to though is that they then want to do something so that when July hits,
yeah,
and quite frankly, we know more, and maybe they're starting to see changes in price or something, they're not saying, I wish I had done something in April. So I feel like there's sometimes this feeling
yeah,
of like activity to, is
right.
there the ways that I can reduce my risk? There's a way that I can offset this, or plan for it or things like that. And and I wonder, looking at, as you talked about the historical ways that tariffs impact and the economic impacts and understanding that a little bit, does that start to frame up some of the discussions that or information that you guys are starting to try to put out there, answer of this is something to either watch for,
Yeah,
either plan for,
yeah,
historically, this is what to expect if things go this, with a big caveat that
sure.
next week that could
It could be
change.
totally
So
different.
everything
Yeah,
has an asterisk that you're going to say. I
yeah,
realize
sure,
that
sure.
fine print.
Well, I'm gonna try to stay at a level where I might not even need an asterisk.
Okay.
We'll see if I can do
Okay.
this. Before I do that, I do want to say that, like, they talk about how markets hate uncertainty. You know who also hates uncertainty? Business owners. Like, this is, everyone is putting their blood, sweat, and tears into these businesses, making them work, making them as efficient and effective as possible. And to have uncertainty in the supply chain is just like, this is, I think, where a lot of the frustration comes from. There's a lot of craft brewery owners are the people who are just like, give me a problem and I'll solve it.
Yeah,
But when the problem is a moving target, I think that is one of the things that's potentially most frustrating at this moment in time. Um,
absolutely.
but as I said, in terms of what to do now, and as I said, I'm hoping this doesn't need a caveat. Is to be in touch with suppliers for these brewery owners to be in touch with their suppliers to understand, keep the conversation open to understand what those suppliers are up against potentially, where there are vulnerabilities, what alternative products might be available to help them get to the same thing. That might not be possible with certain hop varieties, but maybe it is for merchandise or whatever it is that they might understand sort of like what alternatives exist. And I think kind of painting that whole picture will help a business owner understand where they might need to diversify. If they're getting all of a particular input from one place that they expect is going to be highly impacted, then maybe it's worth kind of like understanding the total landscape and seeing where else, how they could kind of diversify their inputs to make sure they're protected a little bit. And this is true for tariffs. It's also true, when I think about ingredient suppliers and the fact that we're facing droughts and wildfires and things like that. Like being able to have open dialogue with their suppliers gives them the best chance of getting what they need, having those suppliers be able to procure what they need to get them that, and be able to kind of work together as partners, which they should be, kind of into the future, into an uncertain future.
I can understand that, and I think that is a good tip and a good thing to do. I do think it's interesting what you noted there, what the interaction is. I've actually been challenging some of our support partners that we work with too to talk with about actually some communication back to your customers, and that we've
Yeah,
actually, and I've noted some and some ideal some that I think are doing it well. I've seen some communication from Ball and Crown and some large malt providers who are saying, I'm just giving you an update. These are large organizations providing kind of a, this is what's going on. Now that same approach, I think, could help some of the small to medium supply partners, is saying, I don't think it has to be lengthy. It's just an awareness of, here's what we're facing. And here's a little bit on our supply chain. We have 80% coming from here, 20 from here, and just we don't know what we don't know right now as well.
yeah,
But I'm giving you some communication, and so I think that helps. That it's both ways. Yep, it's
yeah,
going to come for the suppliers as well as, if they're reaching out to you, ask how things are going. Hey, you tell me, how are things go, kind
yeah.
of thing, so that it can go both ways.
I couldn't agree more, because if it's a black box, everyone's going to kind of assume the worst in a create in a a busy environment. Everyone's going to kind of assume that things are kind of worst case scenario until there's that open dialogue in both directions. Have each one know, and I think that transparency really builds those partnerships that are necessary for kind of all parties to succeed.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what I thought was interesting about your suggestion too is it's interesting how you're talking about the communication and what you're asking of, if you're a brewery and talking to a split part, someone you've known for years, you've worked with for years, and you're starting to ask them a little bit what's going on, you might uncover or learn that I didn't realize that your supply chain comes through here or
Yeah,
there. And I
yeah,
think it's interesting because I think sometimes the question that the brewer is asking is, listen, I'm only this size.
yeah,
And does that mean you're going to be able to help me out in 3 months when you get a 10% bump? And is our relationship? And I don't believe that's what the conversation that you're implying as. It's more about,
yeah,
tell me what you guys are planning for, what you're doing, all of that. And I
yep,
have that data point so that in July, if there's an email about price increase, I shouldn't be 100% surprised.
yeah,
And as well as I could then in the interim make some decisions about perhaps what we need to do going forward because of that conversation I had in April.
yeah,
It seems like sometimes there's a feeling of like, why would I call? Because I'm small. I don't have any power. I don't,
Mhm.
it seems it's more about collecting information than about flexing any kind of
Yeah,
purchasing power.
rather
Yeah.
than strong arming anyone. It's more to really understand, um, to understand what's happening there, and also to let those suppliers know what you're planning, what you're
Yeah.
worried about, because without that information, they're just kind of guessing what their customers are looking for, and so being that data point, having that personal connection is always going to benefit benefit the brewer.
Yeah. I I appreciate that. I think we'll keep coming. That is a topic we could
Yeah,
spend.
sure.
I think what you also touched on too is the challenge of coming up with tactical suggestions, very rooted when you don't know when you're trying to hit that moving target can
Right.
be dangerous. You could be creating more risk in certain areas than unintended if you suddenly take on, I'm going to buy X amount of this inventory and
Yeah.
store it and maybe lean out my cash flow because I heard or thought this was coming. There's a lot of unknowns. I hear sometimes people hear about 25% is a full application always of that to take what you're buying today and assume 25% more in 60 days. That's not, if I'm understanding right, that's not always how a
Yeah.
tariff might operate. It might, but it
Sure.
also
Yeah.
might be a variation of that or not at all.
Right.
So there's just it seems like going back to your
Yeah.
first statement is it's
Yeah.
perhaps too early to know.
Pay
Um,
attention and don't panic. Yep.
Let me ask you a question that's meant as this is a data question. But I
Yeah.
also know this is how do you separate the economic data that you're working on and putting out there from the political elements that come in when you're talking tariffs, which I think are slightly different than when you're talking inflation that we've been talking about for
Yeah.
years.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
It feels like it's adding another ball to the discussion when you're talking about how to plan for tariffs. Is there's a political talk track?
Yeah.
How do you talk about that when you go to different guild events and someone wants to talk maybe more about how we got here, how we didn't, or an element that isn't part of your data discussion?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as you well know, most data can be politicized in any way. It doesn't have to be a discussion about tariffs or inflation.
Sure.
Could be anything. And so, at the Brewers Association, we're not a political organization. We stay in our lane, which is to promote and protect the small and independent brewers in the U.S. And however, and that's in whatever political environment we're
Yep.
operating within. And so, you know, on my part, in my job, do my best to get our members, unbiased information. Just give them kind of the state of affairs, what we expect to see coming, and I know the same is true on our government affairs side, on our membership and event side. Everyone is here with, our guiding light isn't to push any political agenda, but in any sense, it's to push and, yeah, promote and protect our members. So, yeah, any data, any, project and initiative could be politicized. That's not our lane. So
Yeah.
we leave that to others who do that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think that there's sometimes feel like that old expression just doesn't hold true as far as like just the facts, ma'am, right? The
Yeah,
idea is when you're talking about I'm providing you a scientific document, an element, an
yeah,
Excel sheet. But that and I'm sure you come across it when presenting of saying here's a trend that we're seeing,
yeah.
why we think it's going to continue or not. It's more about I'm just telling you, I'm interpreting the data and where we think and
Right.
why we think it made this change or that change and how you can then use it to run your business.
Yeah,
It seems like I'm part of a lot of different, Facebook groups and chat rooms, and you see this, and it's just a discussion sometimes of where someone wants to talk about, well, how do I plan for this summer? And the discussion of how did we get here? And where I think both are equally good discussions,
yeah,
it seems that one lends themselves to a more tactical data discussion of I'm trying to back to your talking about what the BA provides is
yeah,
data that gives you insight to operate your building, and then
yeah,
let other groups and organizations, or whatever that is, to have that, how do you get here, how do you get out there, the political element of it. But it is to ignore it, I think, or not realize that it's at least a ball in the air. It's kind of
Yeah.
it's how do you, tariffs are, there's so many different components of it, as when you're talking about the economics of it and the
Yeah.
action based. We're trying to help our members separate the political to say, we really want to help you operate your business, and I'm sure that's a
Right.
theme that
It's
you come back to.
that's the same for us. We want brewers to, you know, to help their businesses thrive, to put out amazing products to consumers who deserve great beer. That's where we're at.
Yeah. Well, this is great, man. I had You know, this is going to be for you probably just an unfair question, but I'm going to put it out there
I
anyways
love
because,
those.
yeah, a
Yeah.
loaded and what? Yeah, no. Name your favorite beer and brewery. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, a great way to get hate mail.
Yep.
But when you're talking about perhaps putting tariffs aside of this, is data suggests about future terms, economic trends within the industry.
Mhm.
And I know that's a broad element of it, but you could take
Yeah.
it wherever you want to go for whichever body data trends you want to get to. But at the end of the day, I feel like I talk to people, there seems to be a doom and gloom sometimes over the
Yeah.
industry. And I quite frankly feel like we've turned a corner a little bit
Mhm.
of there's more of like, it's not that it's doom, but it's more of just we're a mature market, and it's
Yeah.
it's more competitive, and this is how it is. And I liked your it's not the field
Yeah.
of dreams
Yeah.
era
Yeah.
anymore. But
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there are some data trends that want to share, people might not be aware of. They could be good or bad, your
Uh-huh.
choice, but maybe putting tariff aside, that's something that you're trying to highlight to the industry for
Sure.
2025.
Yeah. So I guess sort of like one piece is that uh, consumers are evolving, and consumers always evolve. So this is not something new. It's new compared to a couple of years ago. How consumers are behaving, just the fact that they are potentially less loyal to brands and certain products, and now uh, more interested in pursuing certain flavor profiles rather than a particular brand or product. There's more competition than ever, which gives them more choice than ever. But the fact that consumers are evolving is something that always happens, and so what I'm looking at is sort of like what that evolution is looking like right now, and so folks can make strategic decisions accordingly. Um, I get a lot. I've talked a lot since our numbers came out that in 2024 there were more brewery closings than openings. But I think that kind of seems like the sky is falling type of a data point. But I want to put that in some context. So the decline in breweries was about 0.8% of the overall industry. So not 8%, but less than 1%. And for folks who most breweries in this country were started post 2010. At this point, just there is a huge explosion in the 2010s. Um, but the last time that there was a decrease in overall number of breweries in the U.S. wasn't prohibition. It wasn't the 70s. It was 2005 that happened. And actually, the first 5 years of the new millennium, there were slight declines in the number of breweries. Right at that point, the craft market had kind of found kind of a balance point, and kind of where demand would allow that sort of number of breweries.
Yeah.
That changed a lot in the ensuing years as there was explosive growth. And over the past few years, that line is kind of leveling again. And at this moment in time, the industry is always going to match where demand is at. I love craft beer more than any industry, but we're not immune to market forces.
Yeah.
This is how supply and demand works, and so it's also not an indication that this is how things will be forever. It's not an indication that there is this like great like death of the industry, right? As you the term you use, it's signs of a maturing and more mature market. And so yeah, in that from that perspective, I don't know if that's hopeful. As I said, I'm just kind of trying to give information and hopefully folks can kind of put that in the context that works for them. But it will continue to be. I'll use the word challenging now. I think in the near term things don't look like they're going to get less challenging, especially if we're talking about volatility in supply chains and potential price increases, and in an industry where margins aren't enormous. But I also think that adaptation and innovation has been core to who craft brewers are since the start, and that's not going to change. These are businesses that are nimble enough to make changes and meet their consumers where they're at in a way that some larger businesses just like don't have that ability to move a huge tanker ship compared to a speedboat. So yeah, a couple points of reference to take away.
Yeah, I think that's great, man. You picked on a theme that I think we've been hearing about for the last year. We're going to continue to hear about that maturing market, and I like how you led with the data. I would have guessed Prohibition era when you talked about that data point, so would have gotten that one wrong when you talked about that spike. So important to know. I think it is it's very helpful to know that it wasn't that to think that we were going to lock into some kind of consumer metric and it was just going to be an upward trend. But it is hard when you now look around your,
Yeah,
6-year-old brewery and say, I remember when, or 10-year-old
yeah,
brewery when, on Black Friday, the line was out the door and
sure.
kind of thing. And I hear that a
Yeah,
lot. And
yeah,
it's just harder than it was. There's more competition. So, but I think it is important to know, like you said, it's not that the sky is falling, and there are some articles, some things that come out that takes that data point and I think tend to message it of that, where it is, and to use the data to say, let's take a real look at where we are. It's not sugarcoating that it's just going to be easier or that that this is how it's going to be. So I think
yeah,
that's helpful. I think that's where it's good to take the data and let it tell the right story rather and it's usually not either super rosy or super dark. It's just this it is what it is. And I think the goal though is to help you be around in the next few years. It wouldn't
yeah,
help you if I said it's going to be great. You should
yeah,
get 3 more places. You should
yeah,
or whatever. That wouldn't be helpful. Or you should do this or that. And because all we're seeing are signs that it's going to be, or vice versa. You should close up and start making guacamole toast or avocado toast or whatever. So I think
not
that.
not with the if the tariffs on Mexico stand. I don't know that avocado toast is the right
Yeah,
business to be in.
probably something else. More say yes. But I do think they want to, that's what they want. Tell me what the data shows. Tell me how I can help plan. You don't have to sugarcoat it. I'm running a business. I've got employees.
Yeah,
I wanna know what we're facing. But I think it is hard. That part of it is, to your point, it's their baby. They've been growing it. And a lot of them started off in an era where it was easier and got to be part of this boom. And then now seeing it where it is harder. And I think it is they're living through a part where in a few years from now we'll be saying, yeah, you remember when it was, 2005, 2006, it was more challenging than that. But people learned and adapted that. We're
yeah,
thinking for a shirt for CBC is one that on the back says a phrase that I hear a lot that says, "Open a brewery." They said, you'll make millions. They said, like, they don't drink for free here anymore because it's
Yeah.
this like, that was part of it, and there
Yeah.
was just a lot of that, that theme of it's definitely changed, but. Still a good group, and as well as an evolving market. I really want to thank you, Matt. The time, the topics, and leading with the intent to help educate as people are looking for ways to manage their business through this busy 2025. So we'll leave it
Yeah.
at that.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dan. It was really nice to have the conversation with you.
Yeah, you too, Matt. We'll talk soon. Thanks
Take
again.
care. Bye.